Cheryl, we've been over this. Just because you're pink doesn't automatically make you Kirby. We open this one with Cordelia running through a pleasant flower field whilst playfully being chased by her friend. Ah, well, isn't this just so wholesome and nice, and how can they screw this up? Why is it that the most candy-colored magical girls always end up giving me the worst kind of nightmare fuel? Thankfully, this Quentin Tarantino OC was actual nightmare fuel for Cordelia after Nero ended up putting her foot in her face while they were sleeping. With that, what should she do after her friend's foot made her see that? Honestly, I'm just amazed at how flexible those things are. I can barely wiggle mine. The following day, Cordelia of course aired out her complaints, and of course Nero was being her usual obnoxious self. They argued while their teammates didn't really help to resolve it and really mostly just sat on the fence. Their arguments went on for so long that they ended up missing their classes and thus were rightfully chewed out by Henriette. And again, it has been nice to see how consistent the writing for this character has been, with her at least trying to get Milky Holmes back on track to being proper detectives, even if they completely are incompetent and less valuable than Mold. However, she has also understandably reached the end of the line in terms of her patience, and likely was considering just closing down the school even before the expo. Still, her words at least did seem to have some sort of effect on them, as Milky Holmes did decide to actively bury themselves, and they would do this by...
That makes sense to me.
I mean, I kind of get it. If they get a better night's sleep, they could both resolve Cordelia and Nero's feud and wake up properly energized for the day. Personally, my trick in the morning is just some brown muddy water made from burnt beans, but that's probably just me. Anyway, Ellie just so happened to read about better sleeping habits that could help them. The first was the seemingly practical solution of clearing their heads of any sort of stressful activities like work and study before going to bed. I say seemingly because while there are very likely people who can just forget about that stuff, generally when you try to forget about something, you just end up thinking about it harder. Or in the case of Milky Holmes, they just end up filling their heads with even more useless thoughts. Huh, why is Ellie thinking about missing number? That's not what she's thinking about? Then what is she thinking about? Oh. Thus they moved on to something a little more practical and just played games to clear their heads. Only problem was they only had Jenga, one of the most ridiculously stressful games ever, and also one that tends to ruin friendships. Granted, Daryl could do that on her own. Anyway, as a punishment game, Cordelia was made to cosplay as Arsene, which to her credit, she pulled off faithfully, and did get creative with how she pulled off her most distinctive feature. Though on that note, we switch perspectives to the Phantom Thief Empire in the middle of their latest heist, and of course our heroines weren't doing anything about it, much to Henriette's disappointment, but hey, at least the G4 were there. And this is why the Power Rangers ended up becoming a lot less popular than the Lupin Rangers. But yeah, while not a freaky Sakuga fest like the last episode, I do appreciate some of the more creative aspects of this chase sequence to cover up the lower quality animation. In this case, they put a little more focus on the comedy, like no one reacting to the explosions going on, suggesting that this was just an everyday occurrence in this city, or how the Phantom Thieves managed to deal with the cops. And I also do appreciate some references to some long-running mangas. Hey, could you drop those girls for a second? I think Polnareff wants to give you a little bit of a high five. Anyway, the thieves managed to get away by using a decoy phase, which honestly, I don't see any big difference, as both of these things just look like cheap Pot of Greed knockoffs. Back with our supposed maid heroines, Cordelia and Nero continued to bicker like children. All the while, Cheryl continued to have the spatial awareness of a black hole. And Ellie was reading her incest manga. Good for you, girl. And of course, to avoid any further foot incidents, they just did the most obvious solution and rearranged their sleeping positions. Just ignore the fact that from their positions, their arms could reach each other now, but let's let them cook as the real show was about to start. The dream sequence half of this episode was basically like a certain Leo DiCaprio movie that came out a couple years prior to this.
Talking about Inception? That's right, Morty. This is gonna be a lot like that, except, it's gonna make sense.
Well, actually, it was a little more like the DuckTales comic that they had totally homaged, aka ripped off of that movie, as the girls end up sharing dreams. Okay, but seriously, it's a classic trope, and for this show, there might have been an in-universe reason for this, through their magical toys being able to connect their minds and all that. Whatever the case, things were about to get fun, starting from Cordelia's dream where she managed to deal with Nero's foot. This anime is an outlet for the creator's fetishes, isn't it? However, Nero managed to infiltrate her little dream with Kamaboko as her attack lion. Thus, the blue detective launched a counterattack. Meanwhile, IRL, the two were having a foot slam fight, and at the same time, Cheryl and Ellie were just having their own separate dreams. The former, of course, dreamed about eating kamaboko and cheese, which, yeah, I can tell you, that isn't that great of a combination. And Ellie was, of course, dreamy of exposing herself freely, which, yeah, what else would you expect from this little exhibitionist? All of their fussing attracted Henriette's attention, who tried to quiet them down, but she ended up getting a front row seat to something pretty awesome. You know, if Asuka had just piloted this version of the Unit 2, she probably wouldn't have lost to the mass-produced Evas. Also, gotta love that they even threw in some Majinga references. Though with that, Cordelia turned into the most selfish version of Joan of Arc and counterattacked, and yeah, their toys briefly came back while they were sleeping, and I guess Cordelia's clairvoyance toys let her know that she could use Cheryl as a shield, though that just feels like something she'd do naturally without her toys, but whatever. As because of the lowest energy pillow fight ever, she ended up using her telekinesis, all the while Ellie was doing her own thing. Hey, anything is possible with AI art these days. This resulted in her flipping over the bed, which wasn't exactly Herculean strength or anything, but still, at least it led to the optimal result. It also let Cordelia and Nero have a brief bonding moment, which after all of their bickering, was warranted if they went right back to their squabbles. But yeah, after that insane, but still kind of impressive display of their toys, Henriette decided to hold off on her plans just a little longer. The next day, everyone except Ellie didn't get a great night's sleep, so yeah, again, the optimal result. Regardless, they did get enough so that they could actually make it to class, but they also briefly started to act like detectives again. And with that, the episode ended with some kind of clever symbolism, as Henriette's background here included the final 3 books of Sherlock Holmes by Arthur Conan Doyle, including The Return of Sherlock Holmes, when the character was revived after his originally intended death in The Final Problem. This was a fun and yet also kind of wholesome little episode to balance out some of the more chaotic aspects of this show. I mean, sure, it still had probably the usual wackiness, but it also took its time to feature Milky Holmes acting like true friends who can butt heads with each other, as well as further developing Henriette's inner conflict. They are little details that are a bit harder to pick up on through all of the chaos, but there is some decent character building being done here. Let's be honest, we've all kind of been here with friends, especially at sleepovers, which these girls pretty much have to do on a daily basis. As a result, this episode did help to make Milky Holmes a little more relatable, in spite of their overly toxic personalities and just general insanity. There were some wholesome moments here and there, and it was just nice to see them be able to play kind of nicely with each other. That said, yeah, the usual entertaining insanity was still there. The shared dream sequence was easily the best part of this episode, with how creative it got, and also seeing a glimmer of hope developing in Henriette was legit touching. Sure, it was nowhere near as insane as the last episode, but I also do see this as an overall good cooldown episode after all of that. These girls can be good detectives again if they actually try, but they've always kind of been the best of friends in their own unique ways. They are little details that are a bit harder to pick up on through all of the chaos, but there is some decent character building being done here. I mean, in general, we try to keep the vibe easy around these parts, yet entertaining, though that latter trait might not come through as well. Still, look forward to whatever comes next. Until then, though, farewell for now, my friends, and, hey, who left this spinning top here?